we're now going to have our first Learn to Talk. I'd like to introduce Chris Betcher from PLC in Sydney.
Hello everybody, my name's Chris Betcher, I am from Sydney. About a year ago I got invited to go to Yokohama International School in Japan and did a little bit of work with the Cotail group there and also some of the YIS staff the next day, which was great. The day before I got to work with the YIS staff, Kim Cofino said to me, we'd like you to do a little talk to the staff tomorrow morning. I apologise to YIS, the people who have probably already heard this. Kim said, can you talk to the staff tomorrow? Just a little mini keynote thing. I said, sure, what would you like to be about? She said, I don't know, anything inspirational. Okay, so I'm in Japan for 3 days, and I've spent the last 2.5 days in the school working on things and planning. So I haven't seen any of Japan yet. And so I'm sitting in the hotel room that night going, what on earth do I do for an inspirational talk tomorrow? And I got to about 8:30, and I thought, screw this, I'm going out to see some of Japan. This is my last night here, I don't know how long till I get back here. So I just decided to say, to heck with it, I'll come up with something for this talk. So I went out and decided to go travelling around Japan that night. And I discovered that as I was travelling around, I discovered what it meant to be a learner. And I know some of you are here immersing yourself in this world of technology. Well, I got to immerse myself in the world of things that I didn't understand very well. So I want to tell you a little story. I discovered, someone said to me, Shibuya is the place to go when you go to Japan, go to Tokyo area. So I thought, okay, well, everything starts with a goal. So I got a map and I thought, I'm going to go to Shibuya. And I discovered the learning lesson from that is if you know where you want to go, there's less work to get there. And I think every one of these little nuggets that I discovered during the evening that night, as I travelled around the Japanese train system, was like a little lesson in learning for me. And I realised what it meant to be a learner in a strange land. So that was the first one. If you know why you want to go there, then getting there is actually less work. As I walked over to buy a ticket, that's what I saw. And I discovered the next little lesson for being a learner is that everything is hard before it's easy. Whether it's learning a language, whether it's learning some new fact, whether it's learning some mathematical thing, everything is hard before it's easy. And that none of us starts out being an expert. I learned that you learn by doing. You can give me a description all you like about what it means to travel the rail system in a land where I don't understand the language and I don't know where to go or what I'm doing, but you only learn it by doing it. And I thought that was a really important lesson. If you don't do things for yourself, then you never ever really learn to do them. You have to do stuff. I learned that different can be scary. As I was travelling around and getting on and off trains and I had no idea what any of the signs said or where things were going or what I was doing, I'm just trying to get to Shibuya, I discovered that different can be scary and that if the new culture feels scary, then you're probably not a part of it yet. And there's a little lesson there, I thought, for people who are immersing themselves in things like technology when they're not, completely comfortable with it. I discovered that it's okay to be out of your depth. I got to Shibuya Station and I got off, and for those of you that know the station, it's pretty big. And I walked out of the station, went out to the street and thought, where the hell am I? What am I doing? I have no idea. And I realised it's okay to be out of your depth. There's nothing wrong with not knowing what you're doing or where you're going sometimes. And sometimes you might just have to ask for directions. So the learning lesson for that, just ask for directions. If you're not sure, people will help. I discovered that everyone loves the familiar. As I'm wandering around Shibuya, by the way, for those that know, I got off the wrong side of the station. So all the exciting stuff is on this side, but I got off the back of Shibuya Station where there's basically nothing. And I'm wandering around and I was hungry by this stage. I wanted something to eat. And I walked past the McDonald's and it was so tempting because I was comfortable with that. But I realised that nobody likes being out of their comfort zone, but the alternative to being out of your comfort zone is staying there. And I thought that was a nice little lesson. So I didn't go there. Instead, I wandered down the road and I met this guy. He was standing out the front of the restaurant and he was trying to help people to come into the restaurant. And so he knew this much English. And I don't know Japanese. And so he kind of had this little conversation with me and tried to help me and ended up, ushering me into the restaurant, and we talked for a while, as much as we could. And so I thought, this is great, I'm sitting in Japan, having this Japanese meal. I realised later it was actually a Korean restaurant. But I discovered that if you let them, perfect strangers can actually be your greatest helpers. It's okay for goals to change, I realised. So I'm in Shibuya, I'm on the wrong side of the station, nothing's happening. I got it's not a very exciting part of town. And I thought, well, maybe I'm in the wrong place. I'm in Tokyo. Surely, if I go to the centre of Tokyo, that's where all the action's going to be. So I thought, I'm going to go to Tokyo. Those of you who know Tokyo know where this story's going, right? So I jumped back on the station. I thought, I'm going to go to this thing called Tokyo Station. That's got to be the centre of town, where all the action is. Well, if something more worthwhile comes along, be prepared to go after it. Learning lesson. So I got on the train, and I went to Tokyo Station. And I got off the station and I walk out, and that's what I see. Wasn't quite what I expected. Wasn't the flashing lights. I thought I'd be in like Times Square or something, and it was kind of dead. And I realised that sometimes what we expect and what we get aren't always the same thing. I thought there's a lesson in that too. The reason that it wasn't what I expected was because Japan had a bit of an issue with some earthquake stuff earlier that year, and the power was out. And they turned a lot of lights off. So here am I expecting to have all this sort of, whiz-bang Times Square kind of experience, and the power was turned off to save power. So sometimes silly mistakes happen, you expect one thing, you get another, move on. Despite our best intentions, sometimes we overlook the obvious, and we fail spectacularly. Learning lesson in that. As I'm walking back to the station, I thought this was interesting, the building in the background there, and this pathway here made of bamboo. And I just thought that was lovely, that the old and the new can coexist together. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And the lesson for education is sometimes in the race to embrace the future, it's actually important not to forget the past. We're trying to change a lot of things about education. Maybe we need to just look at some of the things that maybe are okay without throwing everything away. So I thought there was a lesson in that. There's always another way to do something. I had to get back to Marunouchi Station, thank you, down in Yokohama. And I thought, I looked at this map of the railway stations, I thought there's got to be an easier way to do this, so I get on another train. And it's scary because I'm going back, not the way I came, I had to go a different way. So the detours can be interesting. Don't be afraid to take them. And I actually enjoyed going home a different way and trying to figure out a better way to get home. As I'm doing this, I realised another lesson, that the more you do something, the better you get at it. I felt much more comfortable by the time I got on my third train that night than I did when I got on my first train that night, because I've done it a few times now. So the more you do something, and everything makes more sense the second time around. I thought there's a learning lesson in that. As I got closer back to Marunouchi Station, I realised that the journey is important. It's the travelling around, it's the going through the process that's actually a really important part of this whole thing. And it's good to have a finishing line, but just sometimes just getting there can be half the fun. And I just thought there was a learning lesson in that as well. And as I got near my final destination, I thought, well, the destination's still important. I'm still really glad I got back to Marunouchi Station that night. So destination is important, just as the journey is. So it's important to enjoy the process, but don't forget, sometimes results do still matter. And finally, I learned that night, because I was going to sit in the hotel room that night and work on this presentation. And it was really tempting to stay there and do that, because that was safe. But what I learned was participating is always better than watching. And actively getting involved in something is always better than being a bystander. Thank you.